good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Fiber for Breakfast. We're now in our 42nd episode of 2025. Before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast. In Washington, D.C., we are now on day 15 of the government shutdown, with no resolution yet in sight. The Senate returned to Washington and held another vote last night on the House-passed measure to fund the government, one of several unsuccessful attempts. As previously reported, there is no anticipated impact to BEAD. FBA is closely monitoring staff changes and other developments at NTIA and related agencies, and we remain actively engaged on issues concerning BEAD and non-deployment funds. At the FCC, FBA provided its initial input to the FCC's network modernization notice of proposed rulemaking on September 29th, and we intend to file concise reply comments on October 27th. Additionally, the FCC issued a notice of inquiry to seek public input on additional ways the agency can accelerate the build-out of wireline infrastructure, specifically using its authority under Section 253 of the Communications Act, which precludes states and local governments from imposing requirements that prohibit or effectively prohibit the provision of telecommunications services. We encourage our members to have an interest in these issues to consider submitting comments in response to the NOI. The initial comments are due on November 17th, and replies are due on this December 17th. These deadlines could shift depending on the current government shutdown situation. Well, I'm in Scottsdale, Arizona today, bright and early, as the Fiber Broadband Association's next regional Fiber Connect workshop is tomorrow, October 16th, here in Scottsdale. This workshop will put a strong focus on tribal broadband, and we look forward to hearing from Nicholas Capozzi, the Arizona Broadband Director, who did a fantastic job, and from Arizona Governor Katie Hobbs. Also this week, we're holding our final Latin America Fiber Connect event for 2025 in Bogota, Colombia. After Scottsdale, our next Fiber Connect workshop will be in Kansas City on November 11th. That is selling out really quickly, so if you haven't registered, please register at ASAP. And then we'll end the year on December 8th and 9th in Palm Springs for our Premier Member meeting. So if you're a Premier Member, that will definitely be the place you want to be. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, my guest is one of our favorite, Jeff Heynen from Dell'Oro, to discuss Dell'Oro Group's 5-year broadband access and home networking forecast. But before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from the team, who will walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We appreciate it. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. However, we want to hear from you. To ask a question, please type it into the question box, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen, and we will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's presentation. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours. And you can find that recording under the Events tab on with the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's presentation, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. Please take a moment to respond. We appreciate your input. With that, I'll pass things back over to Gary to get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David, and good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was Brian Darr from Ookla, discuss how speed test measurements are designed to improve end-user experience. Brian is always one of my favorite guests. I love data, I love Ookla data. And he discussed Ookla's broadband performance testing and how fiber networks generally offer more headroom and capacity for growth, no surprise, while LEO satellites are facing tighter constraints. Starlink's already introduced congestion pricing in high-demand markets like Seattle and New Orleans to manage network load. So if you missed last week's session, you can go to the FBA website to watch the replay. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Jeff Heynen from Dell'Oro, to discuss Dell'Oro Group's 5-year broadband access and home networking forecast. Jeff joined Dell'Oro in 2018 and is responsible for broadband access and home networking, fixed wireless access and CP, cable outside plant, and virtual B&G market research programs. Prior to Dell'Oro, Jeff spent over 12 years in broadband and video analysis. He was with S&P Global Market Intelligence as Consulting and Research Director, responsible for leading its technology research and consulting practices covering broadband equipment, connected devices, Internet of Things, over the top, and video software, cloud computing, mobile infrastructure, and data centers. So that's a mouthful. And before S&P Global Market Intelligence, Jeff spent 10 years with Infonetics Research and IHS Markit as a research director focused on broadband access and video. So basically, I've known Jeff pretty much my whole professional life. Jeff has a bachelor's in international studies from Whittier College with a concentration in economics and a master's in German and European studies from Georgetown. So welcome, Jeff. And for our audience, please type in all your questions as we go and work those in discussion. So with that, let's get things started.
Hey, thank you, Gary. And thanks, everybody, for being here. I always appreciate the opportunity to present our data as well, which in covering the equipment that operators are buying, it gives you a snapshot and a lens into how they're thinking about all the different changes that are happening here with broadband networks. So let's start off really at a high level and talk about some of the trends specifically here in North America that we're seeing. You know, obviously, the market here has been no stranger to consolidation. We continue to see operators merging, this is a function of markets where broadband penetration rates are increasing, and therefore the opportunity to expand networks and expand customer relationships are getting tougher and tougher. So really, when you're adding strategically, you're adding network assets, you're thinking about trying to expose your services and provide your services to a larger addressable market, which therefore yields, hopefully, a higher revenue per user. And so we're seeing that, and specifically when it comes to fiber deployments, fiber broadband services generally, or always, carry a higher ARPU relative to other technologies. It's viewed as a premium technology, and customers are very willing to pay for that premium level of service. What we're also seeing now with more fiber expansion is that operators who before may have thought about decommissioning their copper networks are fully engaged in that process. AT&T is a primary example of that, where they're expected to exit all of their existing copper wire centers by the end of 2029. And that represents for them a $6 billion savings in operational costs. And plenty of other operators are following that same path, seeing the transition to fiber as an opportunity to make their networks more cost efficient, and also to reduce power consumption and other elements of that it's taken years for them to finally move away from. Interestingly, here in the U.S. market in particular, fixed wireless access continues to show really no signs of stopping. Just as subscriber growth at T-Mobile begins to moderate, then Verizon picks up the pace, and AT&T is now picking up the pace in terms of subscriber growth as well. AT&T had initially earmarked its Internet Air service as really a DSL capture on their path to fiber, and they're seeing that now as a competitive differentiator for their services in those markets that they cover. And so the other thing is that with fixed wireless, there was always a concern about overuse of the spectrum and running out of spectrum that should be allocated to mobile data consumption. Well, we're seeing lower mobile data growth rates, and so that is allowing operators to continue to expand the availability of fixed wireless in some of those markets where they were concerned about congestion. So you'll see in a slide a little bit later that we've extended our forecast for fixed wireless CPE growth in order to support those additional subscribers that we continue to see coming from the major mobile network operators. And then across the board, whether it's cable, fiber, and even among LEOs, there's a heavy focus now on elements of service, broadband service, things like latency, jitter, reliability, as opposed to just speed. And so we're seeing operators figure out how to implement things like L4S, right? Low latency, low loss, scalable throughput, and how to update their software and make sure that their hardware is capable of supporting L4S end-to-end, not just in the network, but also within the home. And in talking with operators and equipment vendors, obviously there's been a huge discussion around AI and the impact that will have on broadband networks and data consumption. And really, it's not about the data use itself. It's really about the connection and having a stable, low latency connection. That's going to be extremely important to make sure that those AI functions, whatever they might be, that impact the residential broadband network, are doing so to what customers expect. So when we look at our subscriber growth projections, what we're seeing in terms of those trends is that both fiber and fixed wireless continue to erode the kind of dominant market share of cable here throughout North America. We're projecting that from 2024 to 2029, fiber grows to about 29% of residential subs. FWA grows to 16%. Satellite still has a very small role to play. Still, we think it's around 2% to around 4% at max. And then cable shows that decline from about 57, almost 58% down to 51%. And that translates into average subscriber losses of anywhere from 1 to a little over 1.2 million subscribers. So it's a very dynamic marketplace in terms of technologies. And so we're really just at the cusp of this long-term transition to fiber really beginning. And so how does that translate then in terms of the equipment that operators are buying to support those new fiber subscribers and that network expansion? Well, we're finally, after 2 years, and if I push this back to 2022, you'd see even more OLT port shipments in that year. But the last 2 years have really been about inventory digestion. And we finally reached the stage now where that is over. Operators are now at more traditional and comfortable inventory levels, though that they're being cautious, of course, in terms of how they purchase. So that's why you're seeing a very gradual increase again in the purchases of OLT ports to support their network expansion, as well as upgrades from first generation GPON technologies now to XGS-PON, which is really here in North America the dominant fiber technology and PON technology that operators are depending on for the remainder of this decade. And so, there are three real drivers of these port purchases now. As I mentioned, the fiber expansion projects, the legacy OLT replacements, and then also, of course, in those markets where it is known that operators are going to move to DOCSIS 4.0, and even in those markets where cable operators are moving to DOCSIS 3.1 extended, right, which is still 3.1, but adding additional OFDM channels to support higher upstream bandwidth to remain more competitive with fiber. The fiber ISPs in those markets are responding with upgrades to XGS-PON and really also beginning to consider upgrading to 25 gig PON. In kind of surveying the landscape of both telcos as well as cable operators who have fiber plant or are currently overbuilding with fiber, if they're doing that now in some cases and they know that they have competitors coming in that will pose a threat, they're upgrading to 25 gig essentially to create a moat around those markets and basically tell competitors hands off, like we've got the fastest speeds, you're not going to be able to compete. And so that's where 25 gig is really coming into its own right now. And then when it comes to the endpoints and how those are reflected by subscriber growth, you can see here that although we've got a lot of XGS-PON OLT ports out there and a lot of capacity, operators are still buying a lot of GPON ONTs. And so that suggests, of course, that the combo OLT ports that are in the market are still being used for GPON, But of course, those can be upgraded very, very simply, and then you can have an end-to-end multi-gig connection using that XGS once you've upgraded to an ONT to support those. And we're seeing right now that most operators that have deployed end-to-end XGS services are either offering a symmetric 1x1 service or a symmetric 2x2 service at the higher end. And in some cases, they'll push it even higher than that where necessary. But just in terms of overall technologies on a global basis, North America is so interesting because it dominates the XGS global market. It's roughly 40% of the overall market, even though the total fiber footprint and equipment purchasing in the North American market is usually around 18 to 20% of the global market. So really a focus on providing the latest technologies here in this region. One other thing I'll point out, and I'm sure the FBA and Gary have hosted people that have talked about the middle mile network as well. With these XGS upgrades that are going on in the access network, we're also seeing operators take advantage of that opportunity to upgrade their aggregation networks. So, they're not just thinking about the networks in terms of their individual kind of isolated use case. If they're making a concerted effort to upgrade to XGS, then they're also upgrading those middle mile networks and those aggregation networks, again, for load balancing and really to make sure that those fiber networks are future-proof and that those investments that they are making are also future-proof as well. Now, I mentioned, the sustainability, how the fixed wireless access piece of the market has been surprisingly resilient. Even in, cable operators were dismissive of it very early on, and now have accepted the fact that much of their subscriber losses are due specifically to fixed wireless in key markets, specifically those where maybe they haven't yet upgraded to DOCSIS 3.1 or just were in that process, or maybe their customer service and NPS scores were relatively low, and so customers looking to make sure that their household budgets are balanced found fixed wireless as an alternative. And so what we've done here with our forecast is we've essentially pushed out by 1 year the growth of fixed wireless CPE to support subscriber growth among those mobile network operators. And so we really see now fixed wireless and fiber as kind of this two-pronged attack by telcos, by the largest telcos, of course, to really go after cable operators and kind of kick them while they're down at the moment by continuing to offer package deals to make sure that, and they're also doing this because on the flip side, their cable operators have been very successful in terms of peeling away mobile subscribers. And so there's really this battle and almost almost convergence of where subscribers are coming from and where they're headed to based on the kind of deals. It reminds me a lot of the days when we were talking about triple play, and operators would put together low introductory rates for voice, video, and data services, and then a year or two later, the real price points came, and so you switched providers. I feel we're going into a phase, of course, with a lot of churn, and that then also speaks to the consolidation efforts, because if you have a wider footprint of your network, and then there are customers that are churning, you have an opportunity to take advantage and still be present in those markets when that churn, that inevitable churn, is going to happen. So we've talked a lot about how cable spending is down, how cable subscriber growth is down at the moment, and you can see that reflected here in the investments that are being made in cable infrastructure, so DOCSIS infrastructure in particular. Some of this, of course, is due to new chipsets coming out. Broadcom's unified chipset, which supports both flavors of DOCSIS 4.0, is really just being integrated and being made available in large numbers and large volumes now to be integrated directly into CPE and nodes. But that has been a gating factor and has kept operators from spending and moving forward with these upgrade projects for DOCSIS 4.0 as quickly as they would have liked. At the same time, these cable operators do have to carefully manage their free cash flow and make sure that they're not overspending. They have two pieces to this upgrade cycle, right? Here, what we're showing is what they're investing in the head end. And then on the other side is what they have to do in the outside plant in order to make this DOCSIS 4.0 a reality. And so right now, you can see here that there's a significant ramp expected this year. We've already seen it being reported by some of the amplifier vendors and some of the node housing and passives vendors. And over the course of the next 3 to 4 years, there's going to be a significant ramp in this outside plant spending. So if we go back to the head end, it's understandable here that capital intensity has to be managed by these operators in this at this point in time. So therefore, the head end spending in 2025 stays relatively low. And then we get to a phase here through 2026 through 2028 where there is going to be relatively high capital intensity for cable operators as they do upgrade the head end and the outside plant to support those DOCSIS 4.0 upgrades across their systems. So it's certainly an interesting time there. Last slide I'll show, we talked a little bit about the importance of the in-home network, and certainly when it comes to L4S and other low latency technologies, there is a need for better Wi-Fi technologies in the home. I think everybody acknowledges that. And so we're seeing now this ramp now of Wi-Fi 7 units. So to wireless routers, mesh routers, to support some of these higher speed, lower latency applications. So these are worldwide units. A lot of these units are currently being driven in lower ARPU markets like China by the fiber to the room deployments. And then also in certain European markets where you're still using dual band Wi-Fi 7. It seems almost that we should classify this level of Wi-Fi 7 something else because Wi-Fi 7 by definition is supposed to support all three bands, spectrum bands, but these are typically only supporting two bands, the 2.4 and 5 gigahertz, although they do provide the software features of Wi-Fi 7, just not some of those that take advantage of all three spectrum bands and use the bandwidth available across all of those. So, and of course, just this past couple of weeks, we're already seeing chip samples for Wi-Fi 8, which again, these things come fast and furious. But essentially, if I were to project this out to the end of the decade, we're already looking at Wi-Fi 8 units beginning to ship by late 2029, early 2030. So the Wi-Fi 7 cycle has got about 3 to 4 years here, and that kind of jives with other technologies that we've seen or technology refresh cycles that we've seen in Wi-Fi before. So I think with that, I will hand things back to Gary.
Jeff, as always, you always have great information and great insights. So really appreciate that. We have some really good questions from our audience. So we'll start off with there's some surprise about Wi-Fi 7 being driven by fiber to the room in China as they don't allow 6 gigahertz.
Yeah, and that's why they're using these dual band units. And again, a question as to why we classify this as Wi-Fi 7. honestly, it's worth it almost to call it something else because it doesn't use that 6 gigahertz band. And there's still plenty of countries outside of China where that 6 gigahertz band is inaccessible. So you will continue to see these dual band units really, and they're low cost, of course, require less antennas, and just provide some of the software features that the Wi-Fi 7 standard brings.
Yeah, if I mentioned on Fiber for Breakfast before, I have 5 gig symmetric broadband service from Live Oak Fiber, which is amazing, but I had Wi-Fi 6E, which so it doesn't really give me the 6 gig. So luckily Lytera has a nice fiber to the room, so I can actually put a fiber right to my desktop, to be able to get the full benefit of 6 gig of having 5 gigabits. But how are we? What are you seeing from the Wi-Fi industry? Are they going to be able to keep up with, especially as we're going to 25 gig and beyond?
Yeah, I think Wi-Fi 7 has a theoretical maximum of something like 46 gigs, right? 45 gigs. So in theory, of course, the bandwidth and throughput is there. However, of course, that's not the reality when you're considering Wi-Fi, which is why you mentioned Lytera and others that where fiber to the room, which had been previously thought of as being way too expensive for the North American market, now becomes an option. If you're a subscriber and you place a lot of value on having the end-to-end throughput that you're paying for, then that is certainly an option, that perhaps you're willing to pay for. So it's interesting now that fiber to the room is coming up in more conversations, and certainly with home builders as well, who are building out new neighborhoods. One of the ways that they're attracting home buyers in what is a difficult housing market, as we all know, is having that availability of fiber to every room as a selling point.
Hey, so one of the other questions came up is that with 50 gig PON kind of taking off in Asia, does that still leave room for 25 gig PON if China drives the volumes up and the prices down for 50 gig?
Well, yeah, it's so 25 gig does have a window here for the next couple of years before 50 gig pricing really starts to come down. We're already seeing proof of concept examples of 50 gig out there. Broadcom has got samples available, so it's coming fast, and there's no question that 50 gig will be the dominant technology long term, and will be that next upgrade cycle in the 2030 plus time frame. But within that window, there is some time for 25 gig to occupy a portion of the market. We're certainly seeing Google Fiber and others rely on it as a premium connection for their residential subscribers, let alone their small to medium business customers.
So what your chart showed is everybody's deploying 10 gig symmetric today, and starting to deploy 25 gig, and then soon to be 50 gig. So what do you think of the FCC now proposal to stop looking at a long-term goal of 1 gig down, half a gig up as the aspirational target for broadband? I mean, it seems kind of foolish.
Well, without making any specific comments about the FCC, I think there's always been an element where they've been behind what the reality requires on the ground. So, I think there's so many unknowns right now with consumption. But what we do know in talking with every single operator is that they know that latency is going to be, and jitter are going to be so critical. And even if you upgrade your networks to support higher speeds, and maybe that isn't really what you're offering, but with each incremental speed increase, you're also improving all those other metrics that go into making a broadband connection. So it isn't the outmoded portion of it is by requiring a specific speed level. It's the whole package of broadband. It isn't just 1 gig and 1 gig down and 500 up. I think it's almost antiquated at this point to think about it that way.
Yeah, using speed as a proxy for broadband doesn't work anymore because latency is king, especially as we move into the AI era. Okay, I'm going to sneak 2 questions. We're kind of out of time, but I want to sneak in 2 questions. So first is, cable operators really did well with fiber and BEAD awards, especially Comcast. Is that going to accelerate them to transition to their fiber networks?
I think they think about it in two ways, right? Those BEAD wins will certainly be fiber driven, of course, and so they all know that ultimately that's on the table for them, and that's their path. All these DAA networks that are going into place support mass market DOCSIS 4.0 services, but also have a clear path forward to fiber when they get there. So yes, just like for Charter when they won RDOF builds and we're doing fiber, it's going to be the same kind of blueprint that these operators follow in those other networks, whether it's an edge out from an existing node location or whether it's a full fiber build, a new fiber build with all new node locations being built out.
So last question. So fixed wireless, big loser in BEAD. They gave much of their market share to LEO. Before it was going to be fiber and fixed wireless, and then you put LEO in there with 20% of the BEAD awards or locations. So what is that going to do to, how is that going to play out with now LEO coming into the picture? Is that going to change the fixed wireless kind of market share and growth?
My projections, I didn't have much expectations for fixed wireless as a major player in those BEAD deployments anyway. What we're looking at is fixed wireless as just part of in a lot of cases, a market entry and a way to quickly steal, cable and even legacy DSL customers, and who, may have been unhappy with their current provider. But again, it's that combination of using it as an entry point, as a low-cost entry point with a much better broadband service than what they were getting, with a pathway to fiber for those operators. I mean, we see T-Mobile continuing to make deals to expand its fiber footprint. They see that ultimately there's a limit and a ceiling to how many fixed wireless subscribers they can support before they have to move and transition over to fiber.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we see from fiber operators when they see LEO award. That's basically a holding place for the future fiber customer, because it kind of gets rid of the competition. Well, hey, Jeff.
I would agree, yeah.
Always love it. Really appreciate all the hard work and all your great insights on the industry. So thanks for being with us today. And I hope you guys are all with us next Wednesday. One of my favorite guests, Jonathan Chambers, the co-CEO of Connexon, is going to discuss all broadband is not created equal, the practical divide between marketing claims, speed tests, and delivered speeds. So Jonathan definitely never disappoints. So you guys want to join us next Wednesday. Jeff, good luck with your daughter's driving. Hopefully your insurance will stay intact. And let me know what your son chooses for college.
Absolutely. Thank you, Gary.
All right. See you guys.